Have you ever wondered what would happen if those stranger super weapons from the Ace Combat games were real? If you're like me, you probably did, and that's exactly the topic of this video. What if Excalibur was real? Let's take a look at some specification of this stranger super weapon and see how it would play out in a real world scenario, assuming of course if we had the technology and the resources to build a real life version of Excalibur. First and foremost, we need to understand the strategic concept of this super weapon. Excalibur is a laser firing complex developed by the Balkans during the 1980s and built in the 1990s with the goal of intercepting and destroying ICBMs, thus serving as a shield to protect the country in the event of a nuclear war. As you have also seen during the Balkan War, Excalibur can also be used to a certain degree as an anti-aircraft weapon against large and slow aircraft such as bombers and transports. However, Excalibur isn't effective against fast and maneuverable aircraft such as fighters who are able to quickly change direction and therefore evade its attacks. According to Mission 8 of Ace Combat 0, a single attack from Excalibur's laser beam is enough to destroy any aircraft. To get some more information about the weapon, I measured how long each laser beam lasts and what is the interval between them, the period the weapon needs in order to cool down. And I got a beam of about 7 seconds long and an interval of 5.3 seconds between the two beams. I did the same in Mission 9 and the results were quite different. In Mission 9 the laser beam lasts 9.1 seconds long and the cooling interval is almost 17 seconds long. Because the two measurements differ, I will use the ones from Mission 8 since Excalibur is supposed to be a long-range weapon. Using these numbers we get about 5 beams per minute if the time of cooling is taken into account. According to Acepedia, each laser beam requires 1.1 gigawatts of electricity.
But I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
1.21 gigawatts!
That is approximately the same as the output of the Torness nuclear power station in the UK, and that's a lot of energy. Now that we know how much energy it takes to fire Excalibur, what about its range? How far can we target something and hit it with Excalibur? There are actually two different ranges for Excalibur. They are the ranges with and without satellite support, and you can clearly see the difference between them because in Mission 8 the beam is vertical, therefore it goes Excalibur, satellite, target, and in Mission 9 the laser comes straight out of Excalibur. Let's first take a look at the range without satellite support. In this scenario, Excalibur would work based on the line of sight principle, meaning there needs to be a straight line between the Excalibur and the target. And because Earth isn't flat, the curvature of the planet must limit the range of Excalibur at some point. In order to calculate the range without satellite, we can use this formula to calculate the distance to the horizon from Excalibur. And the only thing we need is the height of Excalibur, which we can simply measure by flying beside it, and is about 3,000 feet. Now that we know the height of Excalibur compared to the mean sea level, I've plugged in the numbers into this online calculator and we get a range of about 107 kilometers. Keep in mind though that this comes under the assumption that all the terrain around Excalibur is not higher than the mean sea level, which of course isn't true, but it would give us the maximum possible range if Excalibur was built by the beach. As you can see in this diagram, the shaded region represents the area that is out of range of Excalibur due to the curvature of Earth, but note that it still can hit aircraft flying at certain altitudes. And if you want to know the range of Excalibur for certain altitudes, you can plug in the altitude right here and you see a specific range for that altitude. But what about the range with satellites? Fortunately, we don't need any formula to figure that out. According to Acepedia, Excalibur's theoretical range with satellite support is about 1200 kilometers. That is the same as Stonehenge, and that's a 1093 kilometer increase in range when you put the satellites together with Excalibur. With these specifications in mind, let's take a look at some real life scenarios and tactics regarding Excalibur. with an attack radius of 1200 kilometers and covering an area of about 4,500,000 square kilometers, which is larger than India. Excalibur could completely cover any Western or Central European country and have enough range to attack the neighboring nations. If Excalibur was to be built anywhere in Europe, it would drastically change the whole geopolitical system in place in favor of the country who controls the weapon. Meanwhile, if it was built in Eastern Asia, it would be able to protect either South Korea or Japan from a North Korean nuclear attack. If it was built in the capital of the United States, it would be able to cover most of the eastern coast, an area so large that would include parts of Florida and Canada. As mentioned before, Excalibur is primarily a defensive weapon against ICBMs with some limited anti-aircraft capabilities. If Excalibur was real, it would be almost impossible to destroy it due to its defensive capabilities. First, you cannot use missiles or bombers because those can be destroyed by Excaliburs from long range. Second, you need to get through the 1200 kilometer firing range, which is something only fast and agile fighters would be able to do by using the estimated firing location technique as it was used in Mission 8 of Ace Combat Zero. Third, when you get in the range without satellite support, Excalibur will be able to cover a wide area in a single beam, as you can see in this diagram here. Fourth, by the time you get close enough to Excalibur, you still have to deal with the jammers and the anti-aircraft weapons such as the rail-based tactical laser systems. In short, the only way of destroying Excalibur would be by either deploying stealth aircraft, which would remain undetected while flying to Excalibur, or using conventional aircraft that could use the terrain such as hills and mountains as cover while it's flying towards Excalibur. Despite the extended range Excalibur has, one major flaw of the weapon is that it needs some kind of radar coverage in order to track and hit targets. Without that, Excalibur would only be able to attack and hit non-moving targets such as cities and airfields. First things first, you're gonna need a lot of energy in order to operate Excalibur, so building it close to a good source of energy is recommended. Other than that, it should be built in a central region of a country, far from any borders, in order to better defend itself against any surprise attack from a neighboring country and to cover more area of the home country. Also, it is recommended to build it in a plain or a flat region so that enemy aircraft cannot use the surrounding terrain as cover. These were my thoughts and considerations about the construction of Excalibur and how it would play out had it been built on Earth. Of course, we'll never see Excalibur here on our planet Earth, but I hope that with this video, although being an what if video, helps you understand the true power and magnitude behind Excalibur, which I think is the most underrated superweapon of the Ace Combat series, since it can attack enemies in the air, ground, sea, and even space, as long as they are within line of sight or the 1200 kilometers range. Before we finish it up, I'd like to give my thanks to the folks from Acepedia for some of the data which was crucial in the creation of this video, and as always, stay tuned to the channel for more Ace Combat.